The mahogany staircase in my daughter Sarah's house had always seemed too steep for my 65-year-old knees. But I climbed it anyway that evening, arms full of gifts, my heart full of joy. I'd just retired early from running my pharmaceutical company and couldn't wait to tell her about my plans to help with their new baby. Then I felt her hands on my back, shoving hard. "Hurry up, don't embarrass me in front of my real parents." As I tumbled down those stairs, my head cracking against the hardwood, I heard them laughing. Nobody came to help? I laid there at the bottom of those stairs for what felt like an eternity, though my watch later told me it was 20 minutes. 20 minutes of listening to their laughter drift from the dining room, the clink of silverware on china, my daughter's voice carrying through the walls as she entertained her in-laws. My vision swam, and I could feel something warm trickling down the side of my face. Blood, I realized, as I finally managed to push myself up to a sitting position. The pain in my head was nothing compared to the ache in my chest, as Sarah's words echoed in my mind. Real parents. Harold and Dorothy, her husband Paul's parents, had somehow become more important to her than the man who'd raised her alone, after her mother Martha passed away when Sarah was just 12. I gripped the banister and hauled myself to my feet, pausing as a wave of dizziness threatened to send me tumbling again. Through the archway, I could see them all seated around the dining table I'd bought Sarah as a housewarming gift 3 years ago. Harold was gesturing animatedly with his fork, his booming voice filling the space while Dorothy tittered at something he'd said. Paul sat quietly, as he always did when his parents were around. And Sarah, my daughter, didn't even glance toward the foyer where her father had just taken a potentially fatal fall. Moving carefully, I made my way to the half-bathroom near the entrance, needing to assess the damage. The face staring back at me from the mirror was a stranger's. Blood matted my silver hair on the left side, and a purple bruise was already forming along my temple. My hands shook as I dampened a towel and pressed it to the wound. That's when I noticed it. Or rather, what I didn't notice. The bathroom walls used to hold photos of our family vacations, Sarah's graduation, her mother's radiant smile. Now Harold and Dorothy beamed from every frame, their cruise to Alaska, their anniversary party, their vow renewal in Hawaii. Not a single picture of me or Martha remained. I stepped back into the hallway, my eyes scanning the walls with growing disbelief. The living room was the same. Our family history had been erased, replaced entirely by Harold and Dorothy's grinning faces. Even the painting Martha had done during her chemotherapy treatments, a sunset over the lake where we'd honeymooned, was gone. My legs carried me to the kitchen without conscious thought, seeking water for the dizziness that wouldn't quite subside. That's where I found them scattered across the counter as if they meant nothing. Medical bills. But not just any medical bills. These bore my insurance information claims I'd never made, procedures I'd never authorized. Harold's knee replacement, Dorothy's cosmetic dental work, thousands upon thousands of dollars billed to my premium health plan. Can you believe he actually showed up? Sarah's voice drifted from the dining room. I told him we were having a family dinner. Family only. The nerve of some people, Dorothy's saccharine voice replied. Though I suppose we should pity him. All alone in that big house, no real family to speak of. Now! Harold's voice rumbled with false magnanimity. The old fool can't help being dramatic. Probably threw himself down those stairs for attention. You know how these lonely old men get. You're absolutely right, Dad, Sarah said, and the casual way she called him Dad sent another lance of pain through me. He's always been an attention seeker. Remember when I told you about Mom's funeral? He made such a scene crying like that. So embarrassing. I pressed my back against the kitchen wall, the towel still clutched to my bleeding head, as their conversation continued. Well, you won't have to deal with him much longer, sweetheart, Dorothy said. Once the evaluation is complete, we can have him placed somewhere more appropriate. Someone with his obvious mental decline shouldn't be living alone. Or managing his own finances, Harold added with a chuckle that made my skin crawl. Speaking of which, have you had any luck with those account passwords? I'm working on it, Sarah replied. He's paranoid about that stuff, changes them constantly. But don't worry, I'll figure it out. For the baby's sake, you know children are expensive, and it's not like he needs all that money just sitting there. My hand found my phone in my pocket, and without looking, I pressed record. Years of business meetings had taught me to document everything, and this instinct served me well now. Such a good girl, Dorothy cooed. Thinking of your baby's future, though really after the way he's hoarded that wealth all these years while you struggled. We never struggled. Paul's quiet voice interjected the first time I'd heard him speak all evening. Simon paid for Sarah's college. Our wedding helped with the down payment on this house. Paul, honey. Sarah's voice turned sharp. We've discussed this. That was the bare minimum a father should do. Harold and Dorothy have shown me what real parental support looks like. Exactly right, Harold boomed. Why, just last week I was telling my golf buddies about our plans for the baby's nursery. Top of the line everything. None of that second-hand nonsense Simon would probably suggest. I'd heard enough. Moving quietly despite my injuries, I made my way back to the front door, pausing only to grab the gift bags I'd brought. Through the dining room doorway, I caught a glimpse of them, all heads bent together like conspirators, my daughter's hand resting on Dorothy's as if seeking comfort from the woman who'd helped plan my disposal. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I had to grab the porch railing to steady myself. My car sat in the driveway, but I wondered if I should be driving with a head injury. Pride won out over prudence. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of finding me collapsed on their front lawn. As I drove myself to the urgent care center, their laughter still ringing in my ears, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd overheard. Mental evaluation. Placement. Account passwords. My daughter wasn't just choosing her in-laws over me. She was actively plotting to destroy me. The urgent care doctor, a young woman who reminded me painfully of Sarah at that age, took one look at me, and her face turned serious. Sir, what happened to you? I fell down some stairs. I said the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She examined the wound carefully, her touch gentle but thorough. This laceration. The angle is unusual for a fall, and these marks on your back. She pulled my shirt up slightly, revealing what I couldn't see. Sir, were you pushed? I met her concerned gaze and made a decision that would change everything. Yes, I admitted. I was pushed. By whom? She asked, reaching for forms I recognized as mandatory reporting documents. My daughter. The words hung in the antiseptic air between us, heavy with a truth I could no longer deny. The doctor's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing shock and sympathy before she composed herself. I need to document this thoroughly, she said. Elder abuse is a serious crime. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? I thought of my empty house, the security system I'd installed last year. The locks Sarah didn't have keys to anymore, since she'd lost her set 3 times. Yes, I'll be safe at home. As she cleaned and dressed my wound, taking photographs for the medical record, dictating detailed notes about the injury patterns consistent with being pushed from behind, I felt something shift inside me. The pain was still there, both physical and emotional, but underneath it, something else was stirring. Not anger, exactly. Something colder, more calculated. They thought I was a foolish old man, easily disposed of my lifetime of achievements reduced to a bank account they could drain. They sat in my daughter's house at the table I'd bought, planning my institutionalization while I bled on their foyer floor. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I hadn't built a pharmaceutical empire by being weak or foolish. I'd survived corporate takeover attempts, hostile board members, and competitors who'd stop at nothing to destroy me. I'd held my dying wife's hand, and raised our daughter alone while running a multi-million-dollar company. As the doctor handed me discharge papers and a card for an elder abuse hotline, I thanked her politely, my mind already working through the next steps. Sarah thought she knew her old father, the man who'd spoiled her after her mother's death, who'd never said no to any request. But that man had just died on her staircase. What remained was someone far more dangerous, a father with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The clock on my dashboard read 9:47 as I pulled into my own driveway. By my calculation, they'd be enjoying dessert now, probably the apple pie I'd seen on Sarah's counter made from Martha's recipe. The thought didn't hurt anymore. It simply added another item to a growing list. Tomorrow morning, my daughter would wake to a very different world than the one she'd gone to sleep in. But first, I had preparations to make. Sleep had eluded me entirely that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face twisted with contempt, felt her hands on my back, heard Harold's mocking laughter. The doctor had prescribed pain medication, but I needed my mind clear for what lay ahead. By 5 in the morning, I gave up the pretense and made coffee sitting at my kitchen table with a legal pad, outlining everything I'd overheard. At 7 sharp, I drove to my office building. Officially, I'd retired 2 weeks ago, but my keycard still worked, and the security guard, Robert, brightened when he saw me. "Mr. Simon didn't expect to see you here. Thought you'd be on a beach somewhere by now." "Just tying up some loose ends," I said, managing a smile despite the throbbing in my head. "Mind if I grab a few things from my office?" "Course not, sir. You built this place. Far as I'm concerned, you've got lifetime access." My executive assistant had cleaned out most of my personal items, but I'd deliberately left certain files in my private safe. Documents that detailed the full extent of my holdings investment portfolios that even Sarah didn't know existed. And most importantly, contact information for people who owed me favors accumulated over 40 years in business. I was photocopying the last of these when my phone rang. Sarah's number. I let it go to voicemail, listening to the message a few minutes later. "Dad, I'm at your house. Where are you? Your door is locked and my key doesn't work. This is ridiculous. Harold and Dorothy want to take us to brunch at the country club. Call me back." My house key. I'd changed the locks 6 months ago after finding things moved around in my study, but I'd never given Sarah the new keys, always meaning to, but somehow never getting around to it. Now that absent-mindedness seemed like providence. I drove home the long way, giving Sarah time to leave. Sure enough, her car was gone when I pulled up, but something was off. The garden statue near my front door had been moved, and there were fresh scratch marks on my lock. Had she tried to break in? Inside, I went straight to my study, and my blood ran cold. Someone had definitely been here. My filing cabinets were slightly open, papers disturbed. Nothing missing that I could see, but someone had been searching for something. I pulled up my security system app on my phone, scrolling back through the footage. There she was 2 weeks ago, the day after I'd announced my retirement. Sarah letting herself in with her old key, heading straight for my study. The camera caught her photographing documents, rifling through my desk drawers, even attempting to access my wall safe. But that wasn't the worst of it. She wasn't alone. Harold followed her in a small device in his hand that he plugged into my computer. They spent over an hour in my home, systematically searching for financial information. My phone rang again. This time it was my banker, William Frost, a friend since college. "Simon, I'm glad you called yesterday about adding extra security to your accounts. We've had 3 attempted access attempts since midnight. Someone's trying very hard to get into your money." "From where?" "The IP address traces to a residential location. Want me to send you the details?" My hands trembled as I opened his email. The address was Sarah's house. "William," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I need you to freeze everything. Every account, every investment, every asset. Full lockdown." That's rather extreme, Simon. What's going on?" "I'm being targeted by family." The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. "I see. Give me an hour. I'll need override authorization from the board for some of these, but given your standing, consider it done. I spent the next 3 hours going through my house with methodical precision. In my bedroom closet, Martha's jewelry box sat empty. Her engagement ring, the diamond necklace I'd given her on our 20th anniversary, the antique pearls from her grandmother, all gone. But they'd made a mistake. They'd taken the obvious pieces, but left the false bottom intact. Inside, Martha's truly valuable pieces remained the rare colored diamonds I'd bought as investments the vintage Cartier watched the ruby brooch worth more than Sarah's house. In my basement, I found more evidence of their search. Boxes of family photos had been opened, but they'd only taken ones that might show bank statements or documents in the background. They'd left behind the photos that mattered Martha holding infant Sarah, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. Their greed had blinded them to actual treasures. My phone buzzed with a text from Paul. "Simon, I'm sorry about last night. Sarah's not herself lately. Can we talk?" Interesting. The quiet son-in-law was reaching out. I texted back, tomorrow, alone. Downtown Marriott lobby, 2 p.m. By noon, I'd compiled enough evidence to know the full scope of their plan. Forged power of attorney documents with my signature poorly done, but probably good enough to fool a bank teller. Applications for credit cards in my name with Sarah listed as authorized user. Even a real estate listing agreement for my house, though unsigned and undated. The doorbell rang, interrupting my investigation. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a cheap suit holding a clipboard. "Mr. Simon Walker," he called out. "I'm from Adult Protective Services. We've received a concerned report about your welfare." I didn't open the door. "Who filed the report?" "I'm not at liberty to say, sir. But if you could just let me in for a quick welfare check." "I'm fine, thank you. If you have legal authority to enter, please present it. Otherwise, I'm calling my attorney." He lingered for another minute before leaving. Through my window, I watched him get into his car and make a phone call, gesticulating animatedly. No doubt reporting back to whoever had sent him. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. My secure filing cabinet in the bedroom held documents they hadn't found, my real will held by my attorney. Powers of attorney naming my business lawyer, not family. Recent cognitive evaluations I'd undergone as part of my retirement planning, all showing perfect mental acuity. I photographed everything uploading to a cloud account Sarah didn't know existed. The house felt different now, violated by their intrusion, poisoned by their greed. I moved through rooms that held 30 years of memories, seeing them with new eyes. This wasn't just a house they wanted. It was Martha's dream home, the place she'd designed while fighting cancer, determined to create something beautiful that would outlast her. At my kitchen table, I spread out everything I'd found, creating a timeline. The thefts had started small months ago. A missing watch here, a piece of Martha's jewelry there. Always items I might misplace, nothing so obvious I'd immediately know. Then came the insurance fraud, the attempted account access the forged documents. This wasn't a sudden betrayal born of Harold and Dorothy's influence. This was a long-term plan carefully orchestrated. My phone rang. An unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. "Mr. Walker, this is Dorothy. Sarah's concerned about you after your fall last night. We'd love to have you for dinner to make sure you're all right." "How thoughtful," I replied, ice in my voice. "But I have plans." "Oh, that's a shame. Harold found some interesting documents about Martha's estate. Things that might interest you. About certain distributions that may not have been properly handled." Blackmail now. They were escalating quickly. Martha's estate was handled by the finest probate attorneys in the state, I said calmly. "Every distribution documented and legal. But thank you for your concern." Of course. Just trying to help." "Sarah mentioned you've been forgetful lately, misplacing things. We worry about you all alone in that big house." "I appreciate your concern, Dorothy. Give my regards to your husband. I trust his knee is healing well. The surgery must have been expensive." The sharp intake of breath told me I'd hit my mark. "I don't know what you mean." "Of course not. Have a pleasant evening." I hung up before she could respond, then immediately called my insurance company to report the fraud. The representative promised a full investigation and assured me I wouldn't be held liable for the unauthorized charges. As afternoon faded to evening, I sat in Martha's favorite chair, surrounded by evidence of my daughter's betrayal. But instead of despair, I felt clarity. They'd shown their hand too early, gotten greedy and sloppy. They thought they were dealing with a feeble old man too trusting to see the trap closing around him. My phone buzzed with one final message from Sarah. "Dad, stop being childish. We need to talk about your future. Harold knows an excellent facility where you'll be well cared for." I typed back a simple response. "The only thing we need to discuss is your mother's disappointment." Then I turned off my phone, poured myself a scotch, and began making a list of names. Old friends, former employees, people who'd built careers because I'd given them a chance. Tomorrow, I'd start making calls. Tonight, I'd mourn the daughter I'd lost and plan the war I never wanted to fight. In the distance, thunder rolled across the sky, and rain began pattering against the windows. Somewhere across town, my daughter was probably discussing my fate over dinner, confident in her control, secure in her cruelty. She had no idea what storm was coming. Frank Morrison hadn't changed much in the 20 years since we'd served together in Vietnam. His hair was silver now instead of black, and he walked with a slight limp from an old shrapnel wound, but his eyes were still sharp as a hawk's. We met at a small diner outside the city, the kind of place where nobody asked questions, and the coffee was strong enough to wake the dead. "Simon," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "You look like hell." Feel worse," I admitted, touching the bandage on my temple. "Thanks for coming. Your message said family trouble. Must be serious for you to reach out after all this time." I slid a manila folder across the table. Frank had gone into private investigation after the war, building a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. He whistled low as he flipped through the evidence I'd compiled. "Your daughter did this, her and her in-laws. But something feels off about them, Frank. Harold and Dorothy just appeared in Sarah's life 18 months ago, right after Paul got promoted to regional manager at his firm. Before that, Paul never mentioned parents. Said they'd died in a car accident when he was in college." Frank's eyebrows rose. "Resurrection is a neat trick. What do you need from me? Everything. Who they really are, where they came from, what they want. And Frank, I need this quiet. Sarah can't know I'm investigating." "Understood." He pocketed the folder and stood. "Give me 72 hours for preliminaries. Full deep dive will take longer." The meeting with Paul that afternoon proved more enlightening than I'd expected. He sat across from me in the Marriott lobby, nervously shredding a napkin, looking nothing like the confident young man who'd married my daughter 5 years ago. "I don't know what to do, Simon." He began without preamble. "Sarah's changed, ever since my parents showed up." "I thought your parents were dead." Paul's face crumbled. "They are. Were. I mean..." He took a shaky breath. "My real parents died when I was 20. Car accident outside Denver. Harold and Dorothy showed up last year claiming to be my birth parents, saying I was adopted. They had documents, photos, this whole elaborate story about giving me up and searching for me for years. But you don't believe them. I look exactly like my dad. My real dad. Same nose, same eyes, even the same cowlick. And my mom, my real mom, she documented everything. I have my birth certificate, hospital records, baby photos from the day I was born. But when I tried to show Sarah, she accused me of being in denial about being adopted. What do they want, Paul? Money. It's always about money with them. They showed up right after my promotion was announced in the company newsletter. Suddenly, I had long-lost parents who needed help with medical bills, house repairs, investments gone bad. Sarah gave them our savings. When I protested, she said I was being selfish. I leaned back, pieces falling into place. They're running a con. I think so too. But every time I try to research them, I hit dead ends. It's like they didn't exist before showing up on our doorstep. Let me handle that, I said. What I need from you is information. Bank records, any documents they've given you, anything that might help identify who they really are. Paul reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. Everything I could copy without Sarah noticing. Simon, I'm scared. Not for me, but for her. And the baby. What happens when they've taken everything and decide we're no longer useful? That won't happen, I promised. Do they know you're meeting with me? No, I told Sarah I had a client lunch, but she's getting suspicious. Checks my phone, follows me sometimes. Last week I caught Harold going through my briefcase. We parted with a plan. Paul would play along while feeding me information. He'd also start documenting everything, creating a trail we could use later. As I watched him leave, shoulders hunched against the rain that had started again, I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't alone in this fight. Frank called 3 days later, his voice grim. We need to meet, not the diner, my office, and Simon, you're going to want to sit down for this. His office occupied the top floor of a nondescript building downtown. The space was cluttered but organized, walls covered with maps, photos, and connecting threads like something from a detective movie. Frank handed me a coffee and a thick folder. Harold and Dorothy Brennan don't exist, he began. At least not as Paul's parents. Their real names are Howard Brenner and Doris Kraft, professional grifters with a specialty in elder abuse and inheritance fraud. I opened the folder to find police reports, newspaper clippings, and photographs spanning 15 years across multiple states. The same faces stared back at me, sometimes aged with makeup, sometimes with different hair colors, but unmistakably Harold and Dorothy. They've done this before. 3 times that I can document, probably more. Always the same pattern. They research wealthy families, find an angle, insert themselves, and systematically drain assets. Edgar Thompson in Arizona lost $2.5 million before his real daughter discovered the fraud. Margaret Chen in Oregon, $3.8 million. Richard Blackwood in Montana, nearly $5 million. What happened to them? Frank's expression darkened. Thompson died of a heart attack during the trial. Chen committed suicide. Blackwood is in a nursing home, declared incompetent after suffering a nervous breakdown. The cases fell apart without competent witnesses. Howard and Doris walked free every time. I stared at the photos of their victims. Elderly faces, trusting eyes, people who'd worked their entire lives only to have it stolen by predators wearing familiar masks. There's more, Frank continued. Howard has significant gambling debts. We're talking high 6 figures to some very unpleasant people in Vegas. They need a big score fast or they're going to end up in the desert. How did they choose Paul? His promotion announcement included a photo of you all at the company picnic. Public record searches would have shown your net worth, Sarah's marriage, the whole package. They crafted their approach based on available information. The adoption story was genius, actually. Hard to disprove, definitively plays on emotions, creates divided loyalties. And Sarah fell for it completely. Don't blame her too harshly. They're professionals. They know exactly which buttons to push, how to isolate victims, create dependence. Your daughter isn't their first mark to turn against family. I spent the next hour going through every detail Frank had uncovered. Forged documents that would fool anyone but an expert. A web of false identities stretching back decades. Bank accounts in the Caymans. Even a storage unit in Nevada filled with stolen items from previous victims. What about Dorothy? Is she the brains? Frank pulled out another set of photos. Doris is actually the more dangerous one. Howard's a charming con man, but Doris, she's got a record. Assault, poisoning. She nearly killed husband number 2 for his insurance. Only got off because the evidence was contaminated. My blood ran cold. These weren't just thieves. They were potentially murderers. Frank, they've been in my house. Had access to my food, my drinks. I'd get a full toxicology panel if I were you. And maybe avoid eating or drinking anything you didn't prepare yourself. As I left Frank's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Dad, we need your signature on some insurance paperwork, for your own protection. Can you come by tonight? I stared at the message, then at the folder under my arm detailing the destroyed lives Harold and Dorothy had left in their wake. Not this time. Not my family. I texted back, of course, sweetheart. What time? Let them think they had a compliant victim. While they prepared their next move, I'd be preparing mine. Frank had given me contacts at the FBI who specialized in interstate fraud. The evidence we'd compiled would be more than enough to open a federal case. But I needed more. I needed them to incriminate themselves beyond any doubt. And I needed to find a way to save Sarah from their influence before it was too late. That night, I made 3 phone calls. The first to my lawyer updating my will with very specific language about criminal background checks for beneficiaries. The second to my doctor scheduling that toxicology screening. The third to an old friend at the SEC who owed me a favor. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. Outside, the rain had turned to sleet, coating the world in a layer of ice. Fitting weather for what was coming. Harold and Dorothy thought they were closing in on their biggest score yet. They had no idea they'd already lost. They just didn't know it yet. The conference room at Steinberg Associates hadn't seen this much activity since my hostile takeover defense 12 years ago. Marcus Steinberg himself had come out of semi-retirement when I explained the situation, his eyes lighting up with the kind of righteous fury that had made him the most feared attorney in 3 states. Simon, this is unconscionable, he said, spreading Frank's research across the mahogany table. But also fascinating from a legal perspective. Interstate fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, insurance fraud. It's a prosecutor's dream case. Around the table sat my assembled team. Besides Marcus and Frank, I'd brought in James Chen, my former CFO, who'd helped build my company from nothing. Patricia Hartman, a forensic accountant who could find a hidden penny in the Mariana Trench. And surprisingly, Robert Dalton from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. Mr. Walker. Robert began, his young face serious. What you've uncovered goes beyond family drama. The Brenner-Craft organization has been on our radar for years. We've never had enough evidence to move forward. This could be the break we've needed. I want them stopped, I said simply. But I also want my daughter protected. She's a victim here, even if she doesn't realize it. Agreed, Marcus interjected. We'll structure this to minimize Sarah's exposure. Coercion, undue influence, psychological manipulation. There are numerous defenses available. Patricia looked up from her laptop. I've been tracking the money trails you provided. In the last 6 months, approximately $400,000 has been moved from various accounts. But here's the interesting part. It's not going to Harold and Dorothy directly. They're using a complex web of shell companies. Money laundering, Robert said with satisfaction. Add that to the list of charges. Over the next 3 hours, we developed a comprehensive strategy. Legal protections were put in place immediately. Trusts restructured accounts, locked down, new powers of attorney filed with the state. But we needed more evidence, specifically Harold and Dorothy, incriminating themselves. I have an idea, James offered. Simon, what if you appeared to be deteriorating mentally, I mean? Give them what they expect to see. A honeypot trap, Frank mused. Make yourself an irresistible target. Force them to accelerate their timeline. It's dangerous, Marcus warned. If they're capable of violence. I'll take precautions, I decided. But James is right. They need to believe they're winning. That evening, I attended the dinner at Sarah's house as promised, but I'd prepared carefully. A hidden recorder in my jacket. Frank's associate parked outside, my doctor on speed dial. I'd even taken the precaution of eating a full meal beforehand, planning to only pretend to consume whatever they offered. Sarah answered the door, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the daughter I remembered. Then her face hardened. You're late. Sorry, sweetheart. Got a bit turned around. These new traffic patterns confuse me sometimes. I saw her exchange glances with Harold, who stood behind her. Good. Let them think the old man was losing his edge. The house felt different now that I knew the truth. Every family photo had been replaced, yes, but now I noticed other details. Expensive new furniture, art pieces I recognized from an exclusive gallery downtown. They weren't just stealing money, they were already spending it. Simon, Harold boomed, clapping me too hard on the shoulder. How's the head nasty spill you took? Oh, you know, still a bit fuzzy. Doctor says concussions at my age can have lasting effects. Dorothy appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray of drinks. We were so worried. Here I made your favorite. Scotch and soda, right? I accepted the glass, but only pretended to sip. That's very kind, Dorothy. Or should I call you Mom? I added a vacant smile. Sarah says you're her real parents now. Well, we do think of her as our daughter, Dorothy simpered. And you as family, too, of course. The evening progressed exactly as I'd anticipated. They presented insurance documents claiming my coverage was inadequate, forms granting Sarah full financial power of attorney, just in case. Even a brochure for Sunset Meadows, an assisted living facility. It's top-rated, Harold explained. Private room, excellent medical care. Much safer than rattling around that big house alone. I played my part perfectly. Confused but agreeable. Forgetting names, asking the same questions twice. I watched Sarah's face searching for any sign of guilt or second thoughts, but found only impatience. Dad, just sign the papers, she said when I fumbled with the pen. It's for your own good. Of course, sweetheart. I trust you completely. I signed the documents with a shaky hand, making sure the signature looked nothing like my real one. Patricia had assured me that forged documents signed under coercion held no legal weight, but I wasn't taking chances. The real revelation came during dinner. Paul sat silently pushing food around his plate, while Harold regaled us with stories of his supposed business ventures. I noticed Dorothy watching Paul with an expression that chilled me, calculating cold like a snake eyeing a mouse. Paul's been doing wonderfully at work, I mentioned casually. That promotion came with excellent benefits, didn't it? Dad's thinking of investing in Paul's company, Sarah announced. Aren't you, Dad? Harold's eyes glittered. Smart move, getting in on the ground floor. How much were you thinking? 2,300,000. Oh, at least 5, I said dreamily. Or was it 50? I get confused with all those zeros. Dorothy's hand trembled slightly as she refilled her wine glass. Greed and excitement warring on her face. They thought they'd hit the mother lode. You know, I continued, I've been thinking about liquidating everything. Cash is simpler at my age. Maybe put it all in one account, let Sarah manage it. That's very wise, Mr. Walker, Dorothy breathed. Very wise indeed. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of their increasingly bold suggestions. A new will, leaving everything to Sarah. Immediate transfer of the house deed. Liquidation of my company shares. They were so focused on the imaginary fortune that they dropped all pretense of caring about my welfare. As I prepared to leave, Sarah walked me to the door. For a moment we were alone. Sarah, I said quietly, dropping the confused act. Your mother would be heartbroken. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear. Regret. But then Harold's voice called from the dining room, and her face hardened again. Mom's dead, Dad, and you're about to join her if you don't start cooperating. The threat was naked, undisguised. I stared at my daughter, searching for any trace of the little girl who used to fall asleep in my arms reading bedtime stories. She stared back, cold and unmoved. Goodbye, Sarah, I said finally. I love you. Despite everything, I love you. I walked to my car without looking back. Frank's associate followed me home, ensuring I arrived safely. Inside, I immediately uploaded the recording to multiple secure servers. Sarah's threat, Harold's greed, Dorothy's manipulation, all captured in crystal clear audio. My phone rang as I was preparing for bed. Patricia's excited voice burst through the speaker. "Simon, you're not going to believe this. I've been digging deeper into Dorothy's background. She's wanted in Nevada under another name. Not just fraud, suspected murder. Her second husband's death was ruled suspicious but never prosecuted. Send everything to Robert at the FBI, I instructed. And Patricia, start liquidating assets, but quietly. Move everything into protected trusts. If they want to see money moving, let's give them a show." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, processing the evening's revelations. My daughter had threatened my life. Not implied, not suggested. Directly threatened. The little girl I'd raised, whom I'd loved more than life itself, had looked me in the eye and suggested I might die if I didn't cooperate. But amid the pain, a cold clarity emerged. This wasn't Sarah talking. This was programming manipulation, the result of 18 months under the influence of professional predators. She could still be saved, but first Harold and Dorothy had to be stopped. I reached for my phone and scrolled through old photos. Sarah at her college graduation, radiant with possibility. Her wedding day dancing with me to "The Way You Look Tonight," her mother's favorite song. The day she told me she was pregnant, joy and terror mingling on her face. That daughter was still in there somewhere, buried under layers of greed and manipulation. And I'd burn down heaven itself to bring her back. Tomorrow the real war would begin. Tonight I mourned what had been lost and prepared for what must be done. Harold and Dorothy had made a crucial error. They'd threatened the wrong old man. The plan came together with the precision of a Swiss watch. On Tuesday morning, I called Sarah in a panic. "Sweetheart, something's wrong. I can't feel my left side properly. The room keeps spinning. Dad, what's happening?" I think I'm having a stroke. Please, I need help." Within minutes, I heard sirens. The paramedics who arrived were real. I'd called 911 myself, but they were also briefed by Dr. Harrison, my physician of 20 years, who was waiting at the hospital. The performance needed to be flawless. By the time Sarah arrived at St. Mary's Medical Center, I was in a hospital bed, left side, supposedly paralyzed speech, carefully slurred. Dr. Harrison, playing his part magnificently, pulled her aside with grave concern. "Ms. Walker, your father has suffered a significant cerebrovascular event. The damage appears extensive. We're looking at possible permanent disability, perhaps even—" He paused dramatically. "Well, we should discuss end-of-life directives." I watched through half-closed eyes as Sarah processed this information. She was alone. Harold and Dorothy conspicuously absent from this crisis. Her hand trembled as she reached for her phone. "No, don't come yet," I heard her whisper. "But it's happening. The stroke. Yes, just like you said it would if he kept refusing to cooperate." My blood ran cold. They'd predicted this. Or worse, had they caused it somehow, I made a mental note to have that toxicology report expedited. Within an hour, Harold and Dorothy arrived, faces arranged in masks of concern that didn't reach their eyes. Dorothy clutched a folder of documents to her chest. "Oh, Simon," she cooed, approaching my bedside. "You poor dear. This is exactly what we were afraid would happen." Harold nodded gravely. The stress of managing all those assets at his age. If only he'd listened to us sooner. "The doctor says he may not recover," Sarah said, and I heard genuine emotion in her voice. Despite everything, she wasn't entirely lost to me. "Then we need to act quickly," Harold urged, "to protect his interests. And yours, sweetheart. The baby's future depends on it." They produced document after document, power of attorney, asset transfer authorizations, even a DNR order. Dr. Harrison, hovering nearby, played his part perfectly. "I'm not sure he's competent to sign anything in his current state," he said hesitantly. "He can make an X," Dorothy suggested quickly. "That's legal, isn't it, for incapacitated individual?" "I suppose if witnessed properly." They guided my hand, helping me make shaky X marks on every document. What they didn't know was that Robert from the FBI was in the next room with recording equipment capturing every word. Frank was in the hospital security office ensuring all camera angles were preserved, and Marcus had filed injunctions that morning making any asset transfers require court approval. "There," Harold said with satisfaction as I signed the last document. "Now we can ensure Simon gets the care he needs." "Speaking of which," Dorothy added, pulling out a familiar brochure. "Sunset Meadows has an opening. They can take him as early as tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "Isn't that too soon? He just had a stroke." "The sooner the better," Harold insisted. "They have excellent medical facilities, much better than here." I listened as they discussed my fate as if I weren't there. The plan was clear. Get me into a facility they controlled, probably sedate me into compliance and drain everything while I wasted away. It had worked 3 times before. It wouldn't work now. Dr. Harrison excused himself ostensibly to check on test results. In reality, he was meeting with Robert to confirm we had enough evidence. The trap was nearly sprung. "I should call Paul," Sarah said suddenly. "He'd want to know." "No need to bother him at work," Dorothy said quickly. Too quickly. "We're handling everything." "But he's my husband, Dad's son-in-law." "Sarah, darling." Harold's voice took on an edge. "Paul hasn't been supportive of our family. Best to keep him out of this." That's when I saw it. A flicker of doubt in Sarah's eyes. The first crack in their hold over her. The hospital room door opened, and a nurse entered with a tray of medications. But I recognized the walk, the set of shoulders. Frank in disguise come to check on me and deliver a message. As he adjusted my IV, he whispered, "Patricia found it. The smoking gun. Check your phone later." The rest of the visit passed in a blur of false sympathy and barely concealed greed. They discussed liquidation strategies, which assets to sell, first how to handle my estate. Dorothy even suggested a small memorial service. "Nothing elaborate," she said. "Simon wouldn't want a fuss. He's not dead yet." Sarah snapped, then caught herself. "I mean, we should focus on his recovery." "Of course, dear," Dorothy soothed. "But it's best to be prepared." They left as visiting hours ended, Harold carrying the folder of signed documents like a trophy. Sarah lingered for a moment, staring down at me. "I know you can hear me," she whispered. "I know you're still in there. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. But it's too late now. They have everything." After she left, I waited a full hour before, miraculously, recovering some function. Dr. Harrison played along, expressing medical amazement at my sudden improvement. By midnight, I was discharged against medical advice, supposedly confused and disoriented, insisting on going home. In my study surrounded by my assembled team, I finally checked the message from Patricia. She'd found it, the holy grail of evidence. 3 years ago, Dorothy had been recorded discussing the murder of Richard Blackwood's nephew, the only family member who'd questioned their story. The recording was part of a sealed court file that Patricia had accessed through channels I didn't want to know about. "This changes everything," Robert said, listening to the recording. "This is conspiracy to commit murder. With the fraud evidence, we're looking at life sentences." "When do we move?" I asked. "Sunday," Marcus decided. "Sarah's baby shower. You mentioned all the family friends will be there." I nodded. Sarah had sent the invitation weeks ago before the escalation. Over 100 guests expected at the Riverside Country Club. "Perfect," Robert smiled grimly. "Nothing like a public arrest to send a message." But I had one more card to play. That night I called Paul. "They're planning something," he said immediately. "Harold's been making calls to someone in Vegas, arranging a payoff. They need $3 million by Monday or..." He didn't finish the threat. "Oh, Paul, I need you to do something that might be dangerous. Can you get into Harold's computer?" "Maybe. He's careless when he drinks." What am I looking for? Everything, but specifically anything about their past victims. Names, dates, amounts, and Paul, be careful. Dorothy's killed before. The next 3 days passed in tense preparation. I played the part of the confused stroke victim, even checking myself into Sunset Meadows for a tour while wearing a wire. The facility director's eagerness to accommodate Harold's requests for heavy sedation and isolation confirmed our suspicions about their methods. By Saturday night, we had everything. Financial records showing the full scope of their crimes, communications with previous victims' families, the murder recording, even documentation of their connections to organized crime figures who were growing impatient for repayment. I stood in my study looking at Martha's portrait. Tomorrow, at our daughter's baby shower, her world would implode. But it was the only way to save her from something far worse. "I'm doing this for her," I told Martha's painted eyes. "I hope you understand." In the darkness outside, I knew Frank's team was in position. FBI agents were stationed around the country club. Marcus had a judge on standby for emergency custody orders. The trap was set, baited, and ready to spring. Tomorrow, Harold and Dorothy would attend their last party, and Sarah would learn the truth about the monsters she'd invited into our lives. Sunday arrived with the kind of perfect weather that felt like mockery. Clear blue skies, gentle breeze, the country club grounds, immaculate as guests arrived for Sarah's baby shower. I sat in my car across the street, hands steady despite the storm inside me. Frank's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Target's just arrived. Dorothy's wearing the blue dress, Harold's in the gray suit. Sarah looks nervous." I could see them through the club's glass doors. Sarah did look nervous, constantly checking her phone, scanning the arriving guests. Looking for me, perhaps I'd sent a message that morning. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart. FBI units are in position." Robert's voice joined the channel. "Judge signed all warrants at 0600. We're green across the board." "Simon, you sure about this?" Marcus asked for the 10th time. "We could do this quietly, spare Sarah the public humiliation." "No," I said firmly. "They've isolated her from everyone who might tell her the truth. She needs to see it all, hear it from others, or she'll never believe it." I waited until the party was in full swing before making my entrance. The main ballroom was decorated in soft pastels filled with Sarah's friends, Paul's colleagues, and family acquaintances I'd known for decades. The gift table overflowed with wrapped presents for my future grandchild. "Simon." Judge Patricia Weatherby, an old family friend, spotted me first. "We heard you were ill." Greatly exaggerated, Hikem, I replied, noting how conversation stopped as I passed. The stroke story had spread quickly. Sarah stood near the center of the room, frozen, as she saw me walking, normally speaking clearly. Harold and Dorothy flanked her like guard dogs, their faces cycling through emotions. Surprise, calculation, fear. "Dad." Sarah's voice was small. "But the hospital." "Hello, sweetheart. Beautiful party." I kissed her cheek, then nodded to Harold and Dorothy. "Mr. and Mrs. Brennan. Or should I say, Brenner and Kraft." Dorothy's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The room fell silent, except for the tinkling of broken crystal. "I don't know what game you're playing, old man," Harold growled, stepping forward. "But you're clearly confused. Maybe we should call your doctor." "Already here," Dr. Harrison announced, stepping out from behind a cluster of guests. "And I can confirm Mr. Walker is in perfect health. The stroke was theatrical license." "What's going on?" Sarah demanded, color draining from her face. "Dad, what is this?" I pulled out my phone and connected it to the club's AV system, a feature I'd confirmed with management earlier. "I think it's time everyone heard the truth about your real parents, Sarah." The first recording played. Harold and Dorothy in my hospital room discussing my assets while believing I was incapacitated. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they heard Dorothy suggesting sedation to keep me manageable. That's taken out of context," Dorothy sputtered. How about this context? I played the next file, Dorothy discussing Richard Blackwood's nephew's death. Her voice, cold and clinical, filled the ballroom. The nephew was becoming a problem. Sometimes problems need permanent solutions. A little digitalis in his heart medication. Who questions an old man's heart attack? Screams! Several guests stepped away from Dorothy as if she were radioactive. Harold's face had turned the color of ash. Paul, I called out. Would you like to share what you found? Paul stepped forward, laptop in hand. His fingers trembled as he connected to the projection system. These are the real Harold and Dorothy Brennan, he said, as photos appeared on the screen. They died in 1987. Car accident outside Denver. They were my actual parents. New photos appeared. Howard Brenner and Doris Kraft, through the years, their faces changing but always recognizable. With each image, Paul listed a name, a location, an amount stolen. The litany of their victims filled the screen like a memorial wall. You're lying, Sarah whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. They love me. They're my family. Oh, sweetheart. Dorothy's mask finally slipped, revealing the predator beneath. You really are as stupid as your father. Did you think we cared about you? You were just the key to his money. Dorothy. Harold hissed, but the damage was done. Sarah staggered backward, Paul catching her before she fell. No, you said you wished I was your daughter. You said you loved me more than your real parents, I asked gently. Sarah, they targeted you, studied you, found your weakness, the hole left by your mother's death, and exploited it. This is ridiculous, Harold boomed, trying to regain control. We're leaving. Sarah, come with us. I wouldn't do that. Frank materialized beside Harold, his investigator's license visible. See those folks by the exits, FBI? You're not going anywhere except federal custody. As if on cue, agents moved into position, blocking every exit. Robert stepped forward, badge raised. Howard Brenner, Doris Kraft. You're under arrest for interstate fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering. Wait! Dorothy shrieked, as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. It was all Harold's idea. I can testify I know where the bodies are buried, literally. Shut up, you stupid woman! Harold lunged at her but was quickly restrained by agents. The room erupted in chaos. Guests pressed against walls, phones out recording everything. But I only had eyes for Sarah, who stood in the center of it all, tears streaming down her face as her world collapsed. The baby shower gifts, she said dully. They used my credit cards, bought their own presents to look generous. Even this dress, Dorothy picked it out, said it made me look maternal. I moved toward her, but she held up a hand. Don't, just don't. I pushed you down the stairs. I literally pushed my father down the stairs for them. You were manipulated, Marcus said, stepping into his role as counselor. Coercive control is a recognized psychological phenomenon. You're a victim here too, Sarah. A victim. Sarah laughed bitterly. I threatened his life. I signed papers to lock him away. I chose them over my own father. Mrs. Walker. Robert addressed her formally. We're aware of your involvement. Given the circumstances, the psychological manipulation, the pregnancy, your cooperation going forward, the DA's office is willing to discuss immunity in exchange for testimony. Harold, being dragged past, spat in Sarah's direction. Useless brat, we should have killed you both and staged a murder-suicide. Dorothy's response was even more chilling. No, Harold. Suicide was for later, after the baby was born. Postpartum depression is so tragic, isn't it? Sarah's legs gave out completely. This time I caught her holding my daughter as she sobbed against my chest. Around us, FBI agents efficiently processed the scene, gathering evidence, taking statements. The country club's security cameras would provide additional documentation of the arrests. Simon. Judge Weatherby approached. I've issued an emergency order freezing all assets touched by the defendants. Your property is secure." I nodded gratefully, still holding Sarah. She pulled back mascara, streaking her cheeks. "The insurance fraud? The jewelry? Everything I did? We'll handle it," I assured her. "All of it. But Sarah, I need you to understand something. You're my daughter. Nothing, not their manipulations, not your actions under their influence, changes that. Your mother and I loved you from the moment you were born, and that love doesn't stop because you made mistakes." "How can you forgive me?" she whispered. "I betrayed everything you taught me, everything Mom believed in." "Because that's what parents do," I said simply, "and because I know that wasn't you. That was 18 months of professional manipulation. The real you is still in there." Paul appeared with a glass of water and a chair. As Sarah sat, he knelt beside her. "I should have fought harder, stood up to them sooner. They would have destroyed you," Frank interjected. "I've seen their previous victims' families. Those who resisted ended up dead or ruined. Your instinct to gather evidence quietly saved all your lives." The ballroom slowly emptied as guests were interviewed and released. Harold and Dorothy, I couldn't think of them by their false names anymore, were transported separately, their mutual accusations echoing down the corridors. "What happens now?" Sarah asked, one hand protectively covering her belly. "Now we rebuild," I said. "It won't be easy. There will be legal proceedings, financial untangling, probably therapy, but we'll do it together." "The house," she said suddenly. "They're on the deed. They have keys. Oh God, they've been living in my home, eating at my table." "We'll handle that too," Marcus assured her. "Given the circumstances, we can have them removed immediately. Emergency locksmith security system, whatever you need." As the sun set over the country club grounds, casting long shadows across the empty ballroom, I looked at what remained of my family. Broken, but not destroyed. Betrayed, but not beaten. It would take time to heal, to rebuild trust, to find our way back to each other. But we had something Harold and Dorothy never counted on. Real love, the kind that survives betrayal and manipulation. The kind that forgives the unforgivable. The kind Martha had shown me throughout our marriage and that I would now show our daughter. "Come on," I said finally. "Let's go home, all of us." As we left the country club, I saw Frank loading evidence boxes into his van. He caught my eye and nodded. There would be more revelations to come, more victims to notify, more justice to pursue. But for tonight, I had my daughter back. And that was enough. 6 months later, I stood outside the federal courthouse autumn sun, warming my face as I waited. The heavy doors opened, and Sarah emerged thinner than before, but with a clarity in her eyes that had been missing for too long. 18 months in minimum security had given her time to think, to heal, to understand. "Dad," she said simply, and I opened my arms. The ride home was quiet. Paul had wanted to come, but I'd insisted on this moment being just us. There would be time for reunions later. First, my daughter and I needed to talk. "The house looks different," she observed as we pulled into my driveway. "I've made some changes. Your old room is ready if you want it." She nodded, tears threatening. We'd corresponded throughout her incarceration. Letters at first, then calls, finally visits, where we slowly rebuilt what Harold and Dorothy had tried to destroy. The therapy sessions mandated by her plea agreement had helped her understand how she'd been manipulated, how predators like them operated. Inside, she stopped at the restored photo wall. Martha smiled down at us from a dozen frames. Their wedding, Sarah's birth family vacations, quiet moments captured in time. "I'm sorry, Mom," Sarah whispered to the photographs. "I'm so sorry I forgot who loved me." "She would have understood," I said. "Your mother had the biggest heart of anyone I've known. She would have seen through their manipulation immediately, but she also would have forgiven you instantly." We settled in the living room with tea, the same room where I'd discovered the first evidence of Harold and Dorothy's crimes. So much had changed since that night. "Tell me about him," Sarah said. "Tell me about Thomas. My grandson. Born while Sarah was serving her sentence raised for his first months by Paul and me, with the help of a wonderful nanny. The court had granted me temporary custody with Paul having daily access. We'd brought him to see Sarah every week, watching her bond with her son through glass and supervised visits. "He has your eyes," I said, pulling out my phone to show recent pictures. "And your mother's smile. He's crawling now into everything. Yesterday he managed to pull himself up using the coffee table." Sarah studied each photo hungrily, touching the screen as if she could reach through to her son. Will he know who I am?" "He knows your voice. We've played recordings of you reading stories. And look." I showed her a video of Thomas responding to her voice, his face lighting up with recognition. She broke down, then sobbing for all the lost moments, the milestone she'd missed. I let her cry, knowing it was necessary part of the healing. "Harold died," I said when she'd composed herself. 4 months ago, Dorothy's testimony about the poisoning was accurate. By the time they arrested him, it was too late. Liver failure. "Good," Sarah said flatly. "Does that make me a bad person?" "It makes you human. He destroyed lives planned to destroy ours. Some people forfeit their right to sympathy." "And Dorothy?" 25 to life. She's been charged with 3 murders now that other families have come forward. She'll die in prison." Sarah nodded, a chapter closing. "The other families, did they recover anything?" "Some. The FBI traced what they could, but most of it was gone. Gambled away or hidden in accounts we'll never find. I've been in touch with the victims' families. We're setting up a support group, maybe a foundation to help prevent this from happening to others." "Using Mom's name?" "The Martha Walker Foundation for Elder Protection. She would have liked that, I think." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Sarah asked the question I'd been dreading. "Can you ever really forgive me? Not just say it, but really mean it?" I took her hand, feeling the calluses from kitchen duty, the weight loss that made her fingers seem fragile. "Sweetheart, I forgave you the moment I understood what happened. You weren't yourself. That wasn't my daughter pushing me down those stairs. That was a victim of calculated psychological abuse. But I made choices. Under extraordinary manipulation. Sarah, they were professionals. They'd done this before, perfected their techniques. They found your vulnerability, the loss of your mother, your desire for maternal approval, and exploited it ruthlessly. Dr. Henley, my therapist, said the same thing. She called it induced compliance through manufactured emotional dependency. But knowing the terms doesn't make the guilt go away. No, it doesn't. But time will help. And making amends, building something better. That helps too. A car pulled into the driveway. Paul home from work with Thomas. Sarah tensed, then stood smoothing her clothes nervously. "He's missed you," I said. "Paul, he never stopped loving you, never stopped fighting for you in his own way." The door opened and Paul entered carrying Thomas. My grandson had grown so much in 6 months, sturdy and bright-eyed, babbling happily. Then he saw Sarah. The room held its breath. Thomas studied this familiar stranger, this voice he knew, but face he'd only seen in supervised visits. Then he reached out his arms and said clearly, "Mama." Sarah sobbed as she took her son, holding him like the treasure he was. Paul wrapped his arms around both of them, his own tears falling freely. I stepped back, giving them space for their reunion, but Sarah caught my hand. "Stay," she said. "Please, we're family, all of us." Later that evening, after Thomas was bathed and fed and sleeping peacefully in his nursery, we gathered around the dinner table. The same table where Sarah had once plotted my destruction now hosted our resurrection as a family. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, pushing food around her plate, "about what comes next. I can't go back to my old life, pretend this never happened." "What do you want to do?" Paul asked. "I want to help. The foundation Dad mentioned. I want to work with families, help them recognize the signs. I know what it feels like to be under that kind of influence. Maybe I can help others avoid it." The Martha Walker Foundation could use someone with lived experience. I agreed. But Sarah, you need to focus on healing first, on being a mother. The work will be there when you're ready. She nodded, then looked at me with curiosity. Dad, that night at the country club, the FBI agent mentioned you'd recovered triple what Harold expected from selling your company. Did you really sell? I smiled. Actually, no. That was strategic misinformation. I restructured everything into protected trusts. The company is still mine, but more importantly, it's secured for Thomas and any siblings he might have. Harold and Dorothy couldn't touch it if they tried from prison. Always 3 steps ahead, Paul said admiringly, even when they thought you were helpless. Not always, I admitted. I nearly lost everything that mattered because I didn't see the threat until it was almost too late. But Martha always said I was too trusting. She would have spotted them immediately. Tell me about her, Sarah requested. Not the sad parts, the happy memories. I want Thomas to know his grandmother through our stories. So we talked late into the night, sharing memories of Martha. Her terrible cooking, but beautiful singing, her fierce protectiveness of Sarah. Her ability to find joy, even during chemotherapy. We laughed and cried, and slowly began stitching our family back together. As I finally prepared for bed, Sarah hugged me at the bottom of the stairs, the same stairs she'd once pushed me down. Thank you, she whispered, for not giving up on me, for fighting for us, for being the father I forgot I had. Always, I promised. That's what fathers do. The next morning brought new challenges. Media attention from the trial's conclusion, meetings with lawyers about the foundation, Sarah's parole officer visiting to confirm living arrangements. But we faced them together stronger for having survived the storm. 3 months later, at Martha's grave, we held a small ceremony. Not a funeral, but a celebration. Sarah had completed her first successful intervention, helping an elderly woman recognize the signs of financial exploitation by a supposed nephew. The Martha Walker Foundation's first save. I think she'd be proud, Sarah said, arranging fresh flowers by the headstone. I know she is, I replied, watching Thomas toddle between the graves, chasing butterflies with the innocent joy only children possess. Life had torn us apart and brought us back together scarred, but not broken. Harold and Dorothy had tried to destroy us with greed and manipulation, but they'd failed to understand one simple truth. Real love, the kind that builds families and survives loss, can't be stolen or faked or replaced. It can only be temporarily forgotten, and when remembered, it's stronger than ever. As we walked back to our cars, Sarah paused. Dad, what you said that night when I threatened you. You said you loved me despite everything. Did you mean it? Every word, I assured her. Every word. The sun broke through the clouds as we drove home. Thomas babbling happily in his car seat, Paul and Sarah holding hands in the front, and me following behind, watching over my family as I always had and always would. Some stories end with justice, others with redemption. Ours ended with both and the promise of a future Harold and Dorothy could never have imagined. One built on truth, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds of genuine love. Martha would have been proud indeed. Looking back now, I realize that falling down those stairs was the best thing that could have happened. Not because of the pain or betrayal, but because it revealed the truth before it was too late. It forced me to fight for my family, to expose the predators who'd invaded our lives, and ultimately to save my daughter from a fate worse than death. To those of you watching who might recognize similar patterns in your own families, the sudden appearance of overly helpful strangers, the isolation from loved ones, the gradual financial requests that escalate into demands, trust your instincts. Document everything. Seek help. And remember, it's never too late to fight back. Family is precious, but it's defined by love and loyalty, not manipulation and greed. Guard it fiercely. Forgive when you can. And never ever let anyone convince you that the people who truly love you are your enemies. That's the real lesson Harold and Dorothy taught us, though not the one they intended. They showed us that evil exists, often wearing a friendly face and offering false comfort. But they also proved that real love, the kind that survives betrayal and rebuilds after destruction, is stronger than any con artist's scheme. What would you do if someone you trusted pushed you down the stairs? Would you have the strength to get back up, uncover the truth, and fight for your family's future? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, or might help someone you know, please consider sharing it. Like and subscribe for more true stories of triumph over adversity. And remember, sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the worst betrayals. Thank you for listening to my family's journey. May you never need these lessons. But if you do, may you find the strength to stand up, fight back, and protect those you love. Until next time, hold your real family close, trust, but verify and remember. No one who truly loves you will ever push you down the stairs.